Mazatlan, February 2014, 6:40 a.m. The steel door of beachfront apartment 401 is breached in seconds. The most wanted man on the planet isn't surrounded by an army. He is in his underwear, reaching for an assault rifle, AK-47, while his wife and twin daughters scream in the next room. For 13 years, Joaquín El Chapo Guzmán was a ghost, a man who lived in the clouds of the Sierra Madre and moved through the earth like a shadow. The DEA spent billions. The Mexican Marines lost hundreds of men. And yet, there he was, caught in a budget condo with a bag of tortillas on the counter. How does a man who built a $3 billion empire, owned a fleet of submarines, and escaped the unescapable, twice end up in a 7 by 12-foot concrete box in Colorado? He didn't just fall, he was dismantled. This is the story of the rise, the hubris, and the final crushing capture of the man who thought he was bigger than the state. Number 1. The birth of a peasant. The dirt of La Tuna, 1957. The story doesn't begin in a boardroom or a palace. It begins in the suffocating dust of La Tuna, Badiraguato. In 1957, this wasn't just a village. It was a feudal trap located in the heart of the Sierra Madre Mountains. This is a place where the Mexican government didn't exist, where there were no paved roads, and where the only law was the cycle of the harvest. Joaquín Guzmán Loera was born into a wooden shack with a dirt floor. His father, Emilio Guzmán Bustillos, was a gomero, a small-time peasant farmer of opium poppies. But Emilio was also a violent alcoholic who viewed his children as labor rather than family. Young Joaquín was pulled out of school by the 3rd grade, not because he lacked the intellect, but because his hands were needed to scrape the resin from poppy bulb. In the 1960s, the Sierra Madre offered a binary choice. You could starve as a subsistence farmer, or you could thrive as a criminal. For Joaquín, growing poppies wasn't a career choice or a path to rebellion. It was a biological necessity for survival. He spent his childhood watching his father squander the family's meager earnings on liquor and prostitutes, while his mother, Consuelo, struggled to feed the children. This resentment became his engine. He realized early that money wasn't just for luxury. It was the only shield against the brutality of men like his father. By age 15, he had already cultivated his own marijuana patch, establishing a small-scale supply chain that would eventually become the blueprint for a global empire. He didn't just grow the plant, he learned how to protect it, how to price it, and most importantly, how to ensure he was never the one left holding the dirt. By the late 1970s, the dirt of La Tuna was no longer enough for Joaquín. He descended from the mountains to the neon-lit corruption of Guadalajara, the then capital of the Mexican underworld. At the time, the landscape was dominated by one man, Miguel Ángel Félix Gallardo, known as El Padrino, the Godfather. Gallardo was a former police officer who had done the unthinkable. He unified the warring Mexican plazas into a single corporate entity called the Guadalajara Cartel. The entry point. Guzmán entered this world as a nobody, a low-level soldier assigned to be a driver. But he didn't just drive cars, he drove logistics. He was tasked with overseeing the bridge between the poppy fields and the US border. While other lieutenants were distracted by the sudden influx of wealth and fame, Joaquín was obsessed with efficiency. He viewed the border not as a barrier, but as a bottleneck that needed to be cleared. It was during this era that Guzmán developed his most terrifying trademark, the executioner's clock. In the drug trade, time is more than money. Time is exposure. The longer a shipment sat in a warehouse or a truck, the higher the chance of seizure or betrayal. Guzmán instituted a policy of zero latency. If a shipment was supposed to arrive at 2 a.m. and the clock hit 2:01 a.m. without a headlight in sight, the person responsible wasn't given a warning. They were shot on the spot. This brutal punctuality wasn't just mindless violence. It was a high-stakes quality control mechanism. It sent a message to the entire supply chain. The shorty is watching. Félix Gallardo noted. While other traffickers were losing loads to laziness or lost drivers, Guzmán's shipments arrived with the precision of a Swiss watch. By the mid-1980s, the Godfather promoted him from the driver's seat to a seat at the table. He was given control over the logistics of the Mexicali Plaza, a key gateway into California. He had officially transitioned from a man who followed orders to a man who gave them, building the foundation of a federation that would eventually outgrow even the Godfather himself. As the 1980s closed, the US government began pouring billions into Operation Alliance, saturating the border with heat sensors, helicopters, and thousands of boots on the ground. The surface had become a high-risk gamble. While rival cartels were still trying to toss bags over chain-link fences or hide kilos in car bumpers, Joaquín Guzmán looked downward. He realized that if the Americans owned the air and the horizon, he would own the geology, the architect's blueprint. Guzmán's true genius wasn't in pulling a trigger, it was in hiring people who used slide rules and compasses. He began recruiting professional mining engineers, men who had spent their lives digging for copper and gold, and redirected their talents toward a new kind of vein, the American consumer. In 1989, he commissioned his first masterpiece, a tunnel connecting a luxury residence in Agua Prieta, Mexico, to a warehouse in Douglas, Arizona. This wasn't a dirt hole or a primitive trench. It was a feat of civil engineering. The hydraulic entrance. The mouth of the tunnel was hidden beneath a pool table in a private home. With the flick of a hidden switch, hydraulic jacks silently lifted the massive table, revealing a concrete staircase. Climate and infrastructure. The 200-foot passage was fully air-conditioned to prevent the cocaine from sweating and featured high-intensity electric lighting and a sophisticated ventilation system to keep oxygen flowing. The rail system, most importantly, it featured a custom rail track with electric cars. Guzmán's subway could move 2 tons of product into the United States in under 15 minutes. By the time the DEA discovered the Douglas Tunnel in 1990, it had already moved an estimated $1 billion worth of cocaine. The Americans were stunned. They realized that while they were building walls on the surface, Guzmán had rendered those walls irrelevant. He had effectively created a sovereign bypass. This success changed the DNA of the drug war. It established Guzmán as the lord of the tunnel and proved his core philosophy. Distance is just a logistical problem that can be solved with enough concrete and silence. He had realized the ultimate truth of the border. The surface of the earth was for the police to watch, but the dark, cool silence of the underground belonged entirely to him. By May 1993, the peace within the Mexican underworld had shattered. A vicious turf war had erupted between El Chapo's emerging Sinaloa Federation and the Arellano Felix brothers of the Tijuana Cartel. The streets of Guadalajara had become a shooting gallery, but the violence was about to spill into the most public arena possible, the Guadalajara International Airport. On May 24th, a Grand Marquis pulled up to the airport terminal. Inside was Cardinal Juan Jesus Posadas Ocampo, one of the most beloved religious figures in Mexico. Simultaneously, El Chapo was arriving in a separate vehicle. The Tijuana hitmen, blinded by adrenaline, mistook the Cardinal's luxury car for Guzmán. They opened fire with automatic weapons, riddling the Cardinal's car with 14 bullets at point-blank range. The Cardinal died instantly. El Chapo, displaying his uncanny survival instinct, dove out of his car, scrambled across the tarmac, and escaped over a perimeter fence while lead flew over his head. The murder of a prince of the church was a black swan event. To save face, the Mexican government hunted Guzmán down in Guatemala in June 1993. He was sentenced to 20 years and sent to the Puente Grande maximum security prison. But for El Chapo, the maximum security prison didn't stop him. It adapted to him. Within months, he had cell phones, fax machines, and guards on his payroll. He hosted parties with lobster and cognac, proving that in a corrupt system, a prison cell is just a private office with better security. It was here that the myth was born, the man who could be captured but never contained. By 2001, El Chapo had been incarcerated for 8 years, but the walls of Puente Grande weren't closing in. They were expanding his power. However, a new threat emerged. The Mexican Supreme Court ruled that extradition to the United States was now legal. For Guzmán, a U.S. prison was a death sentence. He knew he couldn't own a cell in Colorado or Virginia. He had to leave. The official story, fed to the public to mask a massive systemic failure, is the stuff of Hollywood. El Chapo allegedly hid inside a dirty laundry cart covered by sheets and was wheeled out by a maintenance worker named Javier Camberos. According to this version, he bypassed electronic sensors and multiple checkpoints before tumbling out into the freedom of the night. In reality, Guzmán didn't sneak out, he walked out. Investigations later revealed that El Chapo had spent millions turning the prison into his personal fiefdom. He didn't just bribe a few guards, he owned the director of the prison, the internal security chiefs, and the logistics staff. On the night of January 19, 2001, the security cameras were conveniently malfunctioning. The gates were unlocked by the very people paid to keep them shut. He likely left dressed in a police uniform or a business suit, escorted by the guards he had bribed. El Chapo hadn't escaped a prison. He had simply checked out of a luxury hotel once the bill became too high. This event humiliated the Mexican government and proved to the world that Guzmán's true power wasn't gun, it was the unlimited reach of his checkbook. After his 2001 escape, El Chapo didn't go into hiding in a dark basement. Instead, he retreated to his Golden Triangle, the rugged intersection of Sinaloa, Durango, and Chihuahua. Protected by the vertical geography of the Sierra Madre and a 300-man private army, he lived like a medieval king. For 13 years, the most wanted man on earth wasn't just a criminal, he was an economic force. In 2009, the world was stunned when Forbes magazine listed Joaquín Guzmán on its list of the world's most powerful people, estimating his net worth at over $1 billion. He was no longer just a drug dealer, he was a global CEO. He controlled a diversified portfolio of heroin, cocaine, and the emerging gold mine of methamphetamine. His company had better logistics than most international shipping firms and a larger intelligence network than the Mexican government. During this era, a chilling urban legend became a recurring reality in cities like Culiacán and Mazatlan. A group of armed men would enter a high-end restaurant. They weren't there to rob it. They would politely ask every patron for their cell phone, promising they would be returned shortly. Then El Chapo would walk in, enjoy a steak dinner with his associates, and talk business. When he finished, he would pay for every single table's bill in the entire restaurant, return the phones, and vanish into the night. This wasn't just ego, it was strategic branding. In regions where the Mexican state was absent or corrupt, Guzmán provided a brutal form of order. He funded clinics, built roads, and settled local disputes. He became more powerful than the Mexican president because his power was immediate and his taxation, extortion, was absolute. He proved a terrifying socio-political truth. When a state fails to provide security and opportunity, a warlord with $1 billion can easily take its place. By 2015, El Chapo had achieved everything a criminal could dream of: wealth, power, and a legendary status that seemed untouchable. But Guzmán suffered from a classic human flaw: pride. He wasn't satisfied with being a ghost in the mountains. He wanted to be immortalized on the silver screen. He envisioned a biopic that would tell his story to the world, portraying him not as a monster, but as a revolutionary hero of the people. To make his cinematic dream a reality, he reached out to Mexican actress Kate del Castillo, whom he had long admired. Through a series of encrypted but ultimately compromised messages, he arranged a secret meeting that included American actor Sean Penn. In October 2015, the actors were shuttled through multiple checkpoints into the heart of the jungle to sit down with the world's most wanted fugitive. Guzmán believed his encryption and mountainous terrain made him a ghost, but he had underestimated the modern surveillance state. The Mexican authorities, with the help of the DEA, were not tracking him. They were tracking the actors. Every clandestine message sent to arrange the meeting acted as a digital breadcrumb. By the time Sean Penn was shaking Guzmán's hand for a Rolling Stone article, the Mexican Marines were already triangulating the GPS coordinates of the safe house. The man who had stayed invisible for 13 years by living in caves and using human couriers was finally compromised by his own ego. He traded his safety for a chance at Hollywood stardom. The meeting didn't result in an Oscar-winning film. It resulted in a tactical map for a raid. It proved that in the 21st century, the only thing more dangerous than a rival's bullet is the desire to be a celebrity. In February 2014, the Mexican government celebrated the ultimate capture of El Chapo in Mazatlan. They sent him to Altiplano, the highest security fortress in the country, a prison designed with thick concrete walls and no-fly zones to ensure he would never walk out again. But while the world thought Guzmán was trapped, he was actually supervising a massive civil engineering project right under the warden's feet. On the night of July 11, 2015, security cameras recorded Guzmán walking toward the blind spot in his cell, the shower stall. He crouched down, removed a perfectly cut 20 by 20-inch slab of concrete, and vanished. He dropped 30 feet into a subterranean masterpiece that had been under construction for over a year. This wasn't just a tunnel, it was a high-speed transit system, stretching over 1.5 kilometers, nearly a mile. The passage was equipped with the Narco Cycle, a modified motorcycle mounted on a rail system designed to whisk Guzmán to the exit in under 5 minutes. Ventilation and lighting, advanced PVC piping systems for oxygen, and high-intensity lights throughout the entire length. The exit. The tunnel ended in a half-built house in a vacant field, where a private plane was reportedly waiting. The escape didn't just liberate Guzmán, it decimated the credibility of the Mexican state. To build a tunnel of that magnitude, engineers had to remove over 3,000 tons of earth without being noticed, or rather, while being ignored. It proved that El Chapo hadn't just beaten the system. He had treated the system like his own subsidiary. He had turned maximum security into a national punchline, showing the world that as long as he had his checkbook, no wall on earth was thick enough to hold him. On January 8, 2016, after a massive shootout that left 5 of his bodyguards dead, Chapo escaped through, fittingly, a sewer pipe. He emerged from a manhole and hijacked a car, but his luck had expired. The Mexican Marines captured him on a highway looking like a common thief rather than a king. Today, El Chapo resides in the Alcatraz of the Rockies. He is allowed 1 hour of sunlight a day in a cage. He cannot speak to other prisoners. The man who controlled the flow of billions and the lives of thousands is now a number in a system that never forgets. He proved that you can build an empire underground, but eventually, the earth always takes it back. In the end, Joaquín Guzmán wasn't defeated by a rival cartel or a single heroic raid. He was defeated by gravity, the slow, inevitable pull of systems larger than any one man. The same tunnels that made him rich trained the world to look underground. The same corruption that freed him taught the state exactly where it was weakest. And the same ego that built his legend exposed his location. A DX Florence was not just a prison. It was the opposite of everything El Chapo believed in. No crowds, no couriers, no clocks to enforce, no money to move faster than the rule. Just concrete, silence, and time measured in decades. The king of motion has been sentenced to stillness. His story leaves behind an uncomfortable truth. Criminal empires don't collapse when they run out of money or gun. They collapse when they start believing their own mythology. El Chapo didn't lose because he was poor, careless, or weak. He lost because he wanted to be seen. The tunnels are empty now. The mountains are quiet, and the man who once bent nation now lives in a box designed to erase him from history, proving that no matter how deep you dig, the earth always closes in.